Ortofon. It's pronounced Ortofon. And finally, after like 4 videos talking about these cartridges, I'm going to say it correctly as we take a deep dive into the Concorde Music Black LVB 250 from Ortofon. This is a deep dive into the Ortofon Concorde Music LVB 250 Black. LVB stands for Ludwig van Beethoven, as we will get into later. I reached out to Ortofon to make this video since I've looked at almost the entire line of their moving magnet cartridges that they make, including the 2M Bronze, the 2M Black, and the Concorde Music Bronze. I do get to keep this cartridge, so I'm not calling this a review, but I don't make videos about things that I would not recommend or use myself, and this is now my main cartridge in the house, and we'll talk about why, as well as how it compares to both the regular 2M Black and the Concorde Music Bronze, since I have both of those, and we'll also talk about the pros and cons of the Concorde line in general, and why I think that more people should be considering this line than they might realize, especially if you have a Technics turntable, as we're going to get into in a little bit here. First off, I want to be clear, since this came up in the Concorde Music Bronze video by me as a mistake, and I want to clarify this now in this video, this is not a DJ cartridge, and the Concorde Music lineup are not built for DJ use in the sense of backcueing and scratching and things like that. Ortofon does make Concorde style cartridges specifically for DJing, and they are more robust. There are many different flavors of them as well. The Concorde Music series is designed as audiophile home stereo cartridges. And in fact, the Concorde Music lineup is actually inspired by earlier Ortofon cartridges in this form factor that were originally introduced as audiophile grade products. Over the years, Ortofon adopted this form factor since it's extremely easy to set up for DJs with the cartridge being pre-aligned, and so many DJs took to this to the point where it's almost the standard cartridge that you see a lot of DJs using out there today. Let's see what we get out of the box. Now, these things are usually a very basic unboxing here. You usually get the cartridge itself, which has a cap to protect the cartridge when you're not using it. And then if you open the bottom side of it, they usually give you some tools to maintain the cartridge, like a little brush. I'm not really sure what this rubber thing is for. The Concorde Music LVB 250 Black, along with the 2M counterpart, are the flagship and highest end models that you can get for moving magnet cartridges from Ortofon. The LVB 250 Black 2M version was originally introduced as a limited edition lineup to commemorate Ludwig van Beethoven's 250th birthday, and they've continued making it since it was a huge success. Here is a list of the main tech specs of this cartridge if you're interested. I'm not going to go over all of them here, but a couple things to note. This does have a tracking force of 1.8 grams compared with the LVB 250 2M counterpart, which is 1.6 grams. Ortofon did this to make the rubber suspension match the slightly heavier cartridge body, and also with the goal of being optimized for the mass of curved tone arms, which the Concorde Music lineup is more designed for. It has the same nude Shibata diamond stylus type as the Black, but the LVB 250 has a boron cantilever, and we'll get to more on why that's awesome in a little bit. The Concorde Music cartridges are slightly heavier versus the 2M versions. These are 18 grams total versus 16.7 on the 2M series. However, this weight is using the pre-mounted version of the Ortofon SH4 head shell, so it's not really a direct comparison if you're using a different head shell. Also, this has a VTA of 20 degrees, which is identical to the 2M series as well. Now, the Concorde Music series cartridges are voiced to match and perform identically to the 2M series. However, there are some differences. These Concorde Music cartridges have been pre-aligned to the geometry of Technics tone arms, meaning that if you have a Technics table, this should basically perform identical to the 2M LVB 250 on the same table, but you don't need to align the cartridge in this case. This is one of the main strengths about these cartridges and head shell design. You don't need to align it. In fact, you can align it, which we'll come up to later as a slight drawback. But looking at it from this standpoint, a lot of people are interested in stepping up their hi-fi equipment, but they don't necessarily want to constantly tinker with it. And admittedly, in this price range, I do understand that a lot of people do want to tinker with this kind of equipment. However, I can say in my own experience, there are just as many people that would just be fine knowing that this is pre-aligned and ready to go. And again, in the case of a Technics tone arm, it is dead on accurate. So you can be listening and knowing that this is rock solid out of the box, and it takes out a lot of the guesswork. All you need to do to set this up is balance your tone arm, set the weight, and you're good to go. If you want to fine tune your vertical tracking angle, you can dial that in as well, but making the tone arm parallel has worked just fine in my case, and I found this to be a joy to listen to, and not having to set it up was an even better bonus. Now, I've mentioned numerous times that this is designed specifically for a Technics tone arm, and I do not have that. And again, speaking with Ortofon directly, and this is coming from the manufacturers of high-end cartridges that go well into the thousands and thousands of dollars with their moving coil options. This might sound a little controversial, but it's coming from Ortofon. But when you are aligning a cartridge, it is done usually using a 2-point method. But with any pivoted tone arm, the cartridge can only ever achieve 2 points where there is 0 tracking error, or the null points. Despite this, a good cartridge will not produce noticeably diminished sound quality when it's not directly on top of the null points. And so, in essence, you're only getting the correct alignment at those 2 points. If you use the Concorde Music LVB 250 Black on a non-Technics tone arm, like my J-shaped ATL-P7, the only difference is where the alignment points are. At some point, the cartridge is still going to be aligned correctly, and again, there are so many other factors that go into this, like the vinyl itself. This is not a perfect medium at all, but I can say this: using this only on my ATL-P7, it has sounded absolutely amazing with no distortion at all, and adding in the ease of use of the setup has just made me enjoy it even more. Now let's talk more about the sound quality. The LVB 250 differs from the traditional black cartridge lineup in that instead of an aluminum cantilever, there is now a boron cantilever. And this is a more rigid, stiff material, which allows for even higher level of detail and transparency versus the normal black with its aluminum cantilever. This detail was something that I immediately noticed. My setup is the ATL-P7 going into the iFi Zenfone 03, powered by the Fozzy Audio V3 monoblocks and the Fozzy Audio P4 preamp. And all of this is coming out of Wharfdale Linton 85th anniversary speakers with a Polk Audio PS10 subwoofer. And I've been using this setup with my 2M Black prior to getting this Concorde Music LVB 250 Black, and I was very used to the sound of the 2M Black in this system, and I really like it for its fast bass response and the detail clarity, but also the warmth that the Black provides. And the Concorde Music LVB 250 just takes all of that and pushes it up a lot. One of the first records that I tested was the new Analog Productions Buena Vista Social Club 45 RPM, and this is a perfect record to get amazing sound separation and really hear the room of the recording, as well as the detail with all of the percussion that's involved. There's a talking drum that's on some of these tracks, or it's like some kind of underlying bass or like low end drum that's on the first track specifically. And when it drops, the separation between it and the rest of the group is extremely prominent on this cartridge. And I can feel a separation that was not there when listening with just the regular 2M Black. And the same goes with the UHQR Bob Marley Rastaman Vibration. This is an amazing bass profile, and Marley's vocals really just kind of like float in the middle with this. But all of that is amplified a lot with the Concorde Music LVB 250 Black in ways that I didn't think that I would actually notice. But the detail and clarity of this cartridge are extremely prominent. And it's interesting because I've used a lot of this lineup. I started with the 2M Blue, and then I went to the 2M Bronze, and then the 2M Black, and then I moved over to the Concorde Music Bronze. And it's like when you start with the blue, you get this amazing clarity that for most people, myself included, will blow them away initially. And then you get even more clarity with the bronze if you want to step up from there. But then when you move over to the black series, you add back in more of that bass, and it's a lot faster of a bass response. And then it's like you just multiply all of this with the LVB 250, and that's probably coming from all of the detail provided in this boron cantilever. I mean, it's such a tiny little thing that's involved in this, but it's such a huge, huge sound upgrade. Another great thing that adds to the ease of use of this lineup and something to consider versus the 2M series is the upgrade path. You can start with a Concorde Music Red if you wanted to, and then from there only replace the Stylus and go all the way up to the LVB 250 Black, whereas with the 2M lineup, the cartridges are different for the red and the blue, and then for the bronze and the black and the LVB 250 Black. So that is also something to consider. However, there are some obvious drawbacks to this Concorde Music form factor that some people who are spending this amount of money might find. First off, if you do have a bayonet style tone arm, this will not work for you. A lot of project turntables or Regas fall into this category. These style head shells will not work for that. In this case, you will have to use the 2M series for the LVB 250. Also, since these are pre-aligned, you cannot adjust them, and for some people that could be a huge drawback, especially when you feel like you've spent all this money on the cartridge. You really want a lot of that flexibility and fine tuning. For those people, again, the 2M lineup is definitely the way to go on that. As we mentioned in the beginning, if you're a DJ and you do a lot of backcueing and scratching, there are specifically Concorde cartridges out there that will work for you, but the Concorde Music cartridge is not for that purpose. Personally, for me, none of these things were drawbacks. In my world, I am like a borderline audiophile in my record collecting, and I would only call myself a hi-fi enthusiast when it comes to my stereo equipment. I am willing to spend money to get better sound, but I don't know that I will ever be able to afford a super high-end setup. And with all that comes with a super high-end setup, all of the fine tuning that you need to do, of which I don't know if I'm capable of doing that. I've seen videos of people installing their super high-end audio units, and a lot of the times they have the maker of the product there to help them, and I'm sure that is paid time. And if it's not, I don't know anyone who's willing to come to my house and do that work. And I don't know if I fully trust myself to make all of these, high-end decisions on super high-end equipment. I do trust Ortofon, and I do trust Lewis, the product specialist, who has always answered my questions and would gladly help anyone out there regarding their setups. And I think the Concorde Music LVB 250 is a great cross between high-end quality and sound, but also practical ease of use that is reliable. I almost kind of equate it to like a Porsche versus a Lamborghini. Both are super high-end sports cars, but Porsches are very close to being a practical everyday driver, but you can also rip apart a quarter mile with them if you wanted to. You can use a Lamborghini as an everyday driver, but there's going to be a lot more tuning involved with it, and so you just need to know that going in, whereas the Porsche is just going to get you there right out of the box, just like the Concorde Music LVB 250 Black is going to get you there, and you will definitely enjoy the ride as you're going. I highly recommend the Ortofon LVB 250 Concorde Music cartridges. I am very grateful to Ortofon for letting me try out these cartridges and share them with you. There are links below if you would like to check out any of these. They are affiliate links, which means I get a little bit of the portion of the sale if you use those links. If you do end up getting them, definitely let me know in the comments how it works out for you. And if you're interested in this video, you're probably going to like some others on the channel, like these ones here. Go check those out today, and I will see you on the next one.